So she had this family ring of her first marriage and her second marriage that were basically running these, all these slum properties in Los Angeles. And when the prosecutors saw this, that was kind of all the information they needed. And these people were actually brought to court. And once they saw not just this evidence, but some other evidence, you know, they sold everything and theoretically moved out of town. But so, and plus they got, you know, all sorts of fines for you know, trying to get out of doing things. But this is one thing about networks, is that the real networks that are really in power, that are getting things done, aren't always visible. And if you just look at, you know, again, if we ignore the family network, which is really what brings the whole picture together, this looks like a very typical business network. And if we just, you know, if we let the software just organize it, you know, very typical chain. You know, these people organized here, sell, nothing wrong. But when we, you know, we show those family links, we see, aha, you know, there's something else going on here. So, lost my cursor. Okay, so we're all familiar with surveillance and how the government is supposedly watching our phone calls and our email and all sorts of other interesting things like that. Well, there's this word called surveillance, and then who knows French? Who can pronounce this? Surveillance? Okay. So there's surveillance, watchers watching us. There's surveillance, us that are being watched, watching the watchers. So, and that's basically what the definition in Wikipedia defines. So the first person to do this was this guy named Mark Lombardi. And he was an artist. And in fact, he had a show here in Cleveland at Cleveland MoCA probably about 3 years ago. And what he did was he discovered that he could draw these drawings of actual conspiracies, and he can also make them as art. And you know, he can fulfill his life as an artist by drawing these. And so this one right here, this first one, you know, there's George H.W. Bush. This is all about a bunch of oil interests that the Bush family had. And what he basically did was he would get out these books and these newspaper reports that would describe this stuff, and then he would draw these drawings. And he did these all by hand. I know what the algorithms are like in the software, and they're very complex, and they go through hundreds, if not thousands, of iterations to lay out the network in a nice, pleasing way. But he did this all by hand, so it's quite amazing. So here's another one of his where he would put things in a circle. And again, everything fit together pretty nice. You see there's no lines that cross. You know, everything is nice and neat. So it was amazing what he was doing. And would, you know, put these up as art in various exhibitions. Unfortunately, he committed suicide before 9/11, so he would have actually been kind of an interesting person to look at what he would have done with that information. And the reason that he committed suicide, or so the story goes, was that he had been this artist and not a very successful artist. He had spent time as a museum curator. But then he started doing these drawings, and he started becoming more and more famous as an artist. And so this large art gallery or actually museum, I think it was the Whitney Museum in New York, asked him to display his works. And so he did this huge work that was basically the size of this stage. So this big drawing, and his drawings were like that. They were long, long rolls of paper that had these things going on and on. And he did this inside his apartment. And just when he was finished, the apartment above had some pipes break, and his drawing was ruined, and he had a week to go until his big exhibition at the Whitney. So he spent that whole week on coffee, not sleeping, redoing this whole thing. And they said, at the end of that week, of course, with sleep deprivation, and he was just about to have his 50th birthday, so he wasn't a spring chicken anymore. So it was tough for him to make it through that. And they said, with the pressure of that and losing the sleep, he just snapped and committed suicide. Well, then there's the other story that says, well, maybe that's not true. The kind of people that he was drawing were probably not very happy to be shown connected to the various people they're connected to. So I saw his presentation, and you could see in some of those where you have U.S. presidents and Saddam Hussein within, 1 or 2 links of each other. So these people probably aren't happy to see that and have somebody document that. So there was that whole other side that said, oh, he probably didn't commit suicide. Maybe somebody helped him. So nobody knows what really happened, but most people think it was suicide because there were no signs of force into his apartment, things like that. But anyway, he started doing this, and unfortunately, he never met any of the social network people, because it would have been interesting to have him actually talk to social network people and the two to share ideas of how to do things. But anyway, his legacy kind of lives on, and a lot of people, especially a lot of the newspapers now, are starting to do these types of analyses when there's a very complex story going on. And one of the most complex stories that have been going on in Washington of recent is this whole thing around Jack Abramoff, who was this lobbyist who got into lots of trouble, was paying off all sorts of people, and was taking money from Indian tribes and all that. And it's a long story, but a friend of mine started to do this with Inflow and got this far with the map, and then couldn't finish it. But it was amazing how much information was out there. So there was this place called Think Progress, and they had, again, the whole scandal, and they had details on everybody involved and how they were involved. So again, the data's there. We just have to now map it into a network. And so they had information like this. So, Tom DeLay, everything that he did, what he was involved in, who he was connected to. And so again, the data's there. You just have to visualize it as links and as nodes. And so we see this map showed up. I think this was in the New York Times. So again, it shows Jack Abramoff there in the middle, and it shows some of the people that he was connected to and some of the organizations. It shows how money was flowing. And again, so it's interesting now to see that the newspapers are actually printing these maps. And of course, they have artists that make these things look real nice. They have a pretty picture. They have different colors. They make nice curved lines. So if you're good at Illustrator, you can do nice maps like this. And then this other one, this guy was a defense contractor, kind of one of the so-called Beltway bandits. And he was involved in some of these shady deals. And we see that, again, he was linked to Abramoff. We was linked to DeLay. Here's some other people in Congress down here. And so another network map that shows this interconnectivity. And then finally, there's this one out of the Houston Chronicle that again shows Abramoff and DeLay and George Bush and a bunch of people here. And again, how they were connected and what they were connected in. So it's interesting that these very complex stories are now being accompanied by these diagrams that explain, what's going on, who's connected to whom, how the money is flowing, and so on. So now when people say follow the money, we actually have maps that do that. So that's it. Any more questions? Right.
Can you win that contest? Or?
Well, you know, I actually looked at that data, and they have very little social network data in there. They have data about how people rated things, but I know very little about how those people are connected to each other. So if I knew that, then yeah, that would be a fairly easy problem. So if I knew that you rated things a certain way, and you were connected to this other group of people that rated things a certain way, and then Steve was one step away, that would make that problem very easy. But just knowing that a bunch of disconnected people did these various ratings, I can figure out who may like to know each other, but if one's in Alaska and one's in Alabama, you know, that doesn't make sense. So there's a key piece of information missing there. And I don't know if they have it or not. But if they have it, they should release it. And the other thing is, too, they're offering $1 million for that. And if you figure that out, it's worth a lot more than $1 million. It's like Google, too, if you figure that out.
What's the content?
Yeah. So yeah, if there was some social data there, that would be a much easier problem. Any other questions?
One of the things that it talks about is that there's a number of conclusions come to from statistical information and so forth that are kind of startling and against conventional interest from the things you've done over these last 5-10 years. Is there anything that really just set you back on your heels saying, wow, I would not have seen that unless the software revealed it, the analysis revealed it? What's been the biggest startlement to you?
Well, you know, just some of the things that I mentioned. You know, I was surprised at how well the books mapped, you know, the other conventional wisdom, the other studies that were being done, that we were this, you know, this divided nation. Part of that, I was hoping actually that it would show something different. And what was interesting was that not only did those books show that, but I have some other colleagues that studied the political blogs, and they showed that same type of divide. Although the political blogs didn't show as distinct of a divide, but what the researchers that did that said about that was that a lot of the links from the red to the blue and from the blue to the red were just sniping at each other, saying, you know, look at what a jerk this guy is and look what he's saying, not pointing in a positive way. So those were a lot of the cross-boundary connections there. So they were just about as divided.
Stand up. Yeah, I was wondering if you'd considered incorporating time series data into that, maybe through the use of animation or something, so you can look at how this progresses over time.
Yeah, and that's fairly easy to do. You can do time series data by capturing the history as you go, and then you can actually show an animation, or you could just capture month, and then just show how it changes across that. But the thing that you have to be careful about networks is that, again, a lot of links are formed at one time, and then they stay dormant, and they're not obvious, and yet they're still there. So Steve and I have a link, but we don't talk to each other every day or even every week. But it's there. If I need to talk to him, if he needs to talk to me, he can get it. If somebody was watching us, they may not realize that we're connected.
Okay, that's all that's on the out, actually.
Okay.